what is the crisis response team?
Well, that is a great question, and it actually falls under Beth's purview. She supervises the crisis response team at the State Department of Education. And Beth?
Sure. So we received a Department of Justice grant last year to enable us to expand our school safety center, is what we call it. And that enabled us to hire 2 school psychologists. So we have Dr. Erica Olinger and Tricia Goga, and they head up our crisis response team. So they're 2 nationally prepared trainers, 2 of the few in the state in the Prepare curriculum. And so that's an evidence-based model for crisis preparedness and response that lends itself to not only physical safety, but bridging the gap between physical safety and psychological safety as well. So the crisis response team responds to all sorts of different crises, specifically since they are so new. What we've been doing up to this point, they've been responding to student death, faculty death, community member death. If anyone passes in a community that touches a school and touches students, then they're able to respond to that district if the district would like our support, and they offer guidance regarding recovery, and then they also offer guidance regarding preparing for future crisis, both hazard and threat-based. So one of the other really cool things about the crisis response team is they developed a crisis response and recovery team. So what that is it's made up of 30 internal individuals to the State Department of Education. And so they will all be trained in the Prepare curriculum as well. So if there's a large scale crisis, say a tornado or a fire, then our crisis response and recovery team can respond to that, and we'll have a greater capacity to do it. So right now our mental health professionals are responding to crisis if it's a student or faculty death. So our counselors within our department will go. But if it's a larger event, then we have people trained from all different offices within the State Department to do different roles. Like we might need somebody to hand out water, or we might need somebody to reunify students with their families. So it's a pretty cool support that we're happy to be able to provide districts now.
It really is. I know a lot of what both of you ladies do is preventative, preparing for a new year. How are you now preparing for a new school year in the disciplines that you're responsible for?
At this time, we are, of course, the State Department has just released its Return to Learn plan, and our Department of Student Support have contributed greatly to that. So we have a SEL component, a family engagement and connection piece in there, and I'm responsible for academic guidance for counselors and administrators as they prepare to re-engage students with scheduling and providing them steps to take in order to connect with our college and community partners, our career tech partners, working with students on distance learning and alternate schedules, and providing that type of resource for schools. And we also have a college and career readiness piece, which I'm also on that team, to keep students engaged in college and career readiness exploration opportunities, working with districts as far as internships, because that may look different when we return in the fall. So just providing them those opportunities to let them know that they are still there, even though we are on physical distancing and as a result of COVID-19.
Beth, anything?
Yeah, so some other components that we put in the Return to Learn plan are considerations for assessing staff mental health readiness in returning to school. We also have student needs assessment guidance in there, as well as different examples of needs assessments for students' mental health that are shown to do no harm. So that's a really great resource for districts to kind of gauge where their students and their faculty are at before re-entering into the building. And we were able to work with some of our national partners at WestEd and Castle in order to develop that guidance. So,
well, I know y'all have been really thinking about the students coming back off the COVID quarantine and just making sure they're mentally right back where they need to be to learn. But now we've got the news cycle going on right now with the protest and the calls for action, and it's every day on our TV screens. The superintendent on Friday released a statement. In part, she said we need to talk, we need to listen, not be bystanders, ramp up our efforts. And she put the counseling department on notice that, man, you've got to be ready to go. What does that mean to each of you, seeing the statement that the superintendent made?
It means a lot because Beth and I had already been in conversation, just, with our department, just us, and talking about, what can we do for counselors? What we need to reach out and make sure that they have a place to speak safely and listen to their concerns about not only about COVID, but about all the racial tensions and the interactions with police officers, because they're going to have students with resource officers, and what we need to be able to resource them based on what their concerns are. And so we were excited. I was excited to see superintendent's letter, and that she is really expecting all educators to have the conversation. And we are excited about providing our counselors a forum to have the conversation, and based on their needs and their perspectives, and be able to ask their questions, because we will be dealing with students. And just a few, even if it's going to be virtually, you will be connecting and dealing with students. And we want our counselors, we specifically deal with counselors. In my realm, I also deal with, and Beth does as well, with administrators and superintendents. And we want them to have the conversation, but to be careful with it, to be candid with it, and also to be courageous with it. So that is our focus for Friday's speak that we're having with our counselors, because we want to provide them a safe place to have those conversations and to ask those questions, and that we collectively could come up with some solutions in order to effectively deal with students.
So talk about this speak program and what it is about, and what you hope to accomplish by it.
Beth, jump in here anytime.
Oh, I'm letting you take it.
But
this was Petra's baby. She had a really great idea, and I said, yes, I will help you with that and be a part of it 100%, but I cannot take credit for any of the thinking behind it. That was all her. So I'm going to let her take that one.
Now, I am the acronym queen. I have been called that, but I could not sleep. I was like, that's just a way to put the thoughts together based on conversations that we've had on what we need to do. And so when you're writing out the words and writing out what you need, that just came to me. It was like, well, this is what we need to do. And the first thing is safety. They need to be able to speak and share their concerns in a safe place. And so that's the S, and P. We need to process what's going on, like really talk about it and process it, and discuss some possible causes and some solutions that we may need to have. And then we would need to be able to educate each other. We've already gotten resources from people within the agency, from some of our counselors. Hey, I have this, and we need to be able to educate ourselves on what is happening. I really don't do in conjecture and well, what I believe and what I, what makes you think that, what makes you see that, and be able to share the perspectives with one another. And so that is the whole guideline behind that. And then, of course, keeping the conversation going, not let this be a one-stop where it looks like we did that, we said it, and we check-marked it. But this conversation has to continue for us to truly affect change and to make it a part of what we do as counselors, because we're already called to make sure that we treat students and families equitably. Part of the equity piece is considering different backgrounds and race. But that's one of the areas we tend to shy away from because we don't know how to have the conversation. And I really appreciate some of my colleagues reaching out to me and saying, Petra, if I say it wrong, I'm willing to go that distance. I'd rather say it wrong than not say anything at all. And to look for your peers that you can find a safe place to say it, and then they will correct you in love and professionalism, to know that there are people out there willing to help you do that. So that is the whole idea around it. And we thought about it before, other incidents in the state arose. And so we're just let us know that we're on the right track.
So one of the other things that I think is neat that's coming from Counselor Speak is our Office of Student Support is full of many, many experts in many diverse fields. And so one of the things we'd also like to accomplish out of Speak is being able to hear from our colleagues in the field what their needs are and what they need more information on. And then we're going to be able to bring in our broader student support team to help address some of those issues that arise. So if we have a concern about student reentry and bullying regarding COVID-19, if they're sent home for testing, then we can bring in our bullying prevention specialists to help address some of those concerns. So that's another thing that we're looking to provide as well.
Yeah. And it is weekly right now. So that way you ask how often. Right now we're starting weekly. And this first one, we actually invited our bullying prevention specialist, Tosin Akonde, to join us in this particular one, because that was another conversation that we had previously about reentry. And if a student has to miss school and then come back, and, you know, students' fears and, oh, you have the COVID, and, you know, children say what they will say. And so we want to be proactive in resourcing counselors and educators in those events.
You bring up a couple of great points I want to get to. Ladies, in your experience, what can the impact of what we're seeing on TV right now have on a young person, a student? And there's no one there to talk to, maybe.
Yeah, I think what we've been seeing a lot as a result from social distancing is students are really feeling disconnected, and that has a great impact on their mental health. So when we have the news on the TV all the time, it can bring up some anxious feelings and cause some depression. But I think what's most important is that parents are able to talk to their students regarding how what they're seeing on TV is affecting them, and how they can potentially make change in the future. If what they're seeing is leaving them with some uncomfortable feelings, well, how in the future, what can you do to maybe change this for generations to come? But I think it's all about, in order to mitigate some of those mental health issues that might arise from the anxiety being provoked from watching protests on TV and watching the numbers of deaths climb regarding COVID-19, is just to really have those open and honest conversations with kids is really important.
I agree with Beth, and I watched last night the governor's piece with his panel. He and First Lady Stitt. And one of the things that the panelists kept reiterating was to have the conversation and to ask, how does that make you feel? And as a grandmother, my daughter is calling me saying, I had this conversation with Xavier, and, you know, I have to have the conversation because he sees it all the time. And being willing to have the conversation. And I'm so proud of our agency and our counseling department and our crisis response team for providing resources that are applicable to how to help students, how to help educators, and how to help families and parents talk and have the conversation. And so even more so, Friday is going to be very important for counselors to be able to reach the students who do not have someone in the home who's willing to have the conversation. We want them to be able to allow that student to express their feelings, and for us to respond carefully and to really listen and be able to resource that student.
I want to piggyback off that answer, Petra, because I've got it written down here. What if a parent just questions their own beliefs? Maybe for the first time they're having some empathy for the other side of this debate, and they're just not sure what to tell their children. What do those counselors need to be ready to do the first day of class? Because I know that's right where the kid's going to go if the parents have been struggling with it through the summer.
They, you know, first and foremost, and we're going to encourage our counselors to do that, is to be responsive to your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own ideologies. You have to be aware, like I have to be aware on where I stand before and I speak to someone else on that issue, because otherwise I wouldn't know that there's a change in perspective. If I'm not even aware of where I am, you know, whether my thoughts are right or wrong is to be determined later on in the conversation. And so when students come and they have those, and my mom said and my dad said, one of the pieces that we're going to talk about is educate ourselves. And so what makes you think that? And another piece that they brought out was modeling for our children and having the language when we're at home about other racial populations. We have to be mindful of how our children are listening to that. We may not be speaking directly to them, but they hear that and they repeat that when they go out in public. So they will have to be ready. But number one, listen. Do not prejudge that student's conversation. It's from their environment. It's from their heart. It's from their experience. So we have to listen to that and not prejudge them based on our biases. We can't do that.
Student comes to you as a parent or a counselor. Here's the question. Am I a racist? How do you handle that?
So I think back to when I was a practicing school counselor in the building, and if a student came to me and asked that question, I would want to help them to explore their feelings regarding race and explore what they've heard regarding race, and help them arrive to their own answer. And if they don't like the answer that they arrive at, helping them thought process on what are some steps that you can take to maybe change that thinking and change the things you've heard in the past that have led you to have that thinking. I think one of the main things as a school counselor is we don't want to give advice and we don't want to give kids answers. We want to help them seek out their own answers and create their own truths. So I would really just have to help them have a constructive conversation and thought partner around what they think the answer to that question is, and what they can do if they don't like the answer they end up arriving at.
Right. I agree. And then asking them the question, what makes you think that? Mm-hmm. What brings you to even ask that question? Tell me what your experiences are and what you've seen, what you said. When did you do that? Those leading questions to get them to speak, whether they're speaking from their own experience or they're speaking from what they've observed. And one thing that even in my private conversations with people that I know, we tend as a society to think a racist can only be white people. But anytime you prejudged another or put yourself superior to someone else, then you fall into that category. And so that it can be flipped. And so a lot of children don't understand that because that's not what they see. Mm-hmm. We don't see that all the time. And so asking those questions, so what makes you start thinking about that? What happened? And then they will, as Beth said, having those conversations arrive at their own conclusion. And we provide them definitions as they're speaking, context as they're speaking.
And I'm trying to think of some other questions that would parlay with this, and it may be the same answer, but I'm thinking of questions like, should I be afraid? Should I be angry? Do people hate me just because of who I am? Would the answers be the same to those type of questions that might arise out of this? I'm trying to put my brain into a young person's head, and I'm pretty old to do that.
I think, just typical best practice for counseling is, you would tend to follow that same level of thinking and helping students to address those questions. You really, like Petra said, you want to ask probing questions, but you don't want to give them answers. You want to help them arrive to their own conclusions. So, and offering, again, resources and support. And if they do want to, are you feeling angry? Mm-hmm. That would be a good question. Right? And then maybe exploring what the primary emotion is behind that anger, because anger is not a primary emotion. It's a secondary emotion. There's guilt or fear or shame driving that anger somewhere. So let's get to that primary emotion and really figure out, if you are angry, how we can help you not be angry by targeting that first way you felt that got you there.
Mm-hmm. And narrowing it down as especially as a counselor and having been an administrator and having that student sit in your office and having them narrow down their role, their experience in the situation, because, oh, everybody. Okay, tell me how many people were everybody did it. Well, no, and then it's 3 people. Yeah. And okay, so having them really narrow down their personal experience with what's going on, because I realize, I understand how some students will not feel safe in their thoughts and their feelings because that's not acceptable at home. They don't feel safe at home being angry about this situation because of the environment that they've grown up in, or that they're not angry enough at the situation because of the home environment. And so really getting a student to understand their take away mom and dad, take away what you've heard, tell me about you and your experience with this. And getting them to see it from their personal perspective will really, really help, because we take on what we see, we take on what we've grown up with, we take all of that on, and we can't separate my personal thoughts from what I'm expected to feel and think.
What is a school counselor?
Oh man, what isn't a school counselor? We wear so many hats. So many hats. And I think that that's a really great question, and I love that Petra and I are able to be on this call together, because when you think about the Ask a National model, there's really 3 realms to school counseling. There's career and college readiness, academic counseling, and social emotional learning and mental health. So one of the great things that the State Department of Education has done is they recognize that. And so now we have an executive director over all 3 areas. So I'm lucky to get to work so closely with Petra, because I do not do well in the academic guidance area. I'm mental health and SEL, and Petra always makes fun of me. She's like, you live in that gray area over there. I'm gonna be over here. So we work really well together. But when you think about those 3 tiers of school counseling, there's so much that goes into all of them. So it's all about developing good programming to really meet kids where they're at and hit as many kids as you can with universal supports. That way less kids really need those more intensified supports. And that goes for academic support, that goes for mental health support. If we can really tailor our programming to the unique needs of our students in our buildings, then that's the role of the school counselor, is getting to every part of the kid. Petra,
I concur. And in promoting a sense of individuality, a holistic view. A counselor is the person that is in the building to see the potential in that student and connect all of the pieces that are education and support that student through their journey, so that they will be equipped once they leave the high school setting. And so that's primarily what I see as our school counselors. We want them to be the connecting piece to a student and the world that they're about to be responsible for navigating once they leave us.
And that goes for all kids in the building. That doesn't just go to, these are my national merit scholars, so I'm going to put all my focus on them, or this is the club that I sponsor, so I'm just going to do small groups with them, or I might have my own personal biases regarding people from different cultures, so they probably don't really need my help. The counselor needs to serve all students. And if you don't, you probably should not be a counselor.
Right. And so we're working to make sure that we can get the ratios to where our counselors can do the role that they're designed to do.
Exactly.
What are they going to find behind that door if they have the courage to knock on that door saying, I really need to address this?
I was just to say, we would hope that all students are met with open arms, with people who, like Petra mentioned earlier, have done their own individual work regarding where they're at in the continuum of recognizing how they feel, right? And so we want our counselors to be able to have courageous conversations with students and be humble and be able to admit when you're wrong. I mean, we have to be able to support all kids, and we want our kids to feel like they can come to us and that we are a safe place. And even if I don't know everything, I can at least hold space for you and be there with you and let you know that I'm not perfect, but I'm figuring it out too.
Mm-hmm. That's true, because you really don't know what's going to be behind door number 3. we wish we had a cookie cutter counselor model out there, but the fact is that people are people, and people get to make decisions about their feelings, about their thoughts, about their actions, and our desire is that every person, counselors, educators, registrars, office managers, people who are working in the office, secretaries, when they see a student, that they see that student as a person. And when you deal with them, the first thing you need to do is just listen. I mean, and that's the best thing that you can do. If you don't know what to say, I don't know what to say, but I'm willing to listen. And that's the best thing we can ask our counselors to do right now, is to just listen and admit that they don't know what to say.